I'll do it, and I'll apologize again. All right. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing. I have, over the years, been a part of a lot of teacher training sessions. I've attended a lot. Billy, is it okay if I just go?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. And during this time, in the old days of teacher training, it used to be basically resource supplies. You know, how to make a rabbit out of a paper plate, and this kind of stuff. And that's what it was. But curriculum has gotten so much better that the resource side of the thing is not the big issue today. Yeah, the issue today is the assumption that everybody knows how to teach automatically without any training. And that's just not true. And my experience has been that a lot of people have been thrown into the classroom with no preparation at all and have felt very unsuccessful in that classroom experience and said, get me out of here, I don't ever want to teach again. And it's basically because you're thrown into something you don't understand how it works, you're not prepared for the job, you don't know how to connect, and it ends up being just a disaster. So this workshop, this is the first one I developed. I've tweaked it a little bit over the years, but it's the same one. It's worked in every kind of environment I've been in rural churches, in urban churches, in black churches, and white churches, East Coast, West Coast, everywhere I've been. This format has pretty well worked, so I just keep doing it. And it's based on the principle, like the Chinese proverb, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And my goal is to teach you how to fish. I don't want to give you a few little tidbits and you take those to the classroom and you try them and it's done. I want to give you some principles that can really help you develop into the teacher that God wants you to be. So it's just common sense principles, but unfortunately common sense doesn't always attend our congregations. And so I throw them out there for you again, just to remind you of ways that we can connect better with our students. And whether you're teaching the toddler class or teens or adults, it doesn't matter. The principles are the same. So that's why I'm able to bring everybody together in one session and pretty well tell you what I think is important at whatever level you're teaching. We're going to do 3 sessions, and we'll take a 10-minute break or so between session 1 and session 2, come back, hit it again, take a break after session 2 to session 3, and then we'll wrap up by 4:30. And the sessions, each session has its own personality. It's different. First session, I'm pretty well lecturing to you. Second session is much more interactive. And the third session, it will be more of a question and answer kind of thing. So, whatever bed you like to sleep in, Goldilocks, I hope you find one. And the first session, we're going to focus on teachers. The second session, we're going to focus on students. And the third session, we're going to focus on curriculum. So that's kind of where we're going. You might have heard the story that I heard years ago. It was a preacher's story, so I'm not sure it's true. About a middle school principal in a Christian school somewhere in the northwestern United States, Washington State or Oregon, somewhere up in there. And middle school is an interesting age anyway, where young people are changing from young people to adults at all different kinds of rates. And it's kind of crazy time for the kids and for those who try to teach them. But there was one girl in this middle school that had hit her little growth spurt and had become a young lady and become interested in makeup and dressing right to try to attract guys. And so every time they'd get a bathroom break at school, she would go in and apply fresh lipstick. And as part of her routine, after she'd stand in front of the mirror and do that, she would lean across the sink and kiss the mirror to block her lips. Left her lip prints on the mirror. Wasn't a big deal until all the other girls started following the popular girl, and they all started doing the same thing. And by the end of the day, all the girls' restrooms' mirrors were covered with lip prints, of lipstick lip prints. And one day the custodian came to the principal and said, "Look, these girls are killing me. You know, you're paying me to do this and this and this. You're not paying me enough to have to clean all the mirrors in all the girls' restrooms every day. But they're just making a mess. And if I got to keep cleaning this, you're going to have to change my pay." And so she said, "I'll take care of it at the end of the day today." And so she got on the intercom and made an announcement to all the girls and had them gather in the largest girls' restroom, packed them all in there, and had the janitor in there too. And she said, "Girls, as you can see, by the end of the day, we have lipstick all over the mirrors in this bathroom and in every other girls' restroom in the building. And Mr. Johnson has to clean these every day. And I know you're not trying to make it hard on him, but it is making it hard on him. And I just wanted you to see how hard he has to work to clean these mirrors every day. And I think it might change your mind about what you're doing with your lipstick. So, Mr. Johnson, please clean the mirrors." And he went into the first stall with a toilet brush and came out and started cleaning the mirrors. And no more problems. You know, no more problems. It's amazing. That's an educator. Educators figure out ways to communicate so that people understand. It gets the message across, and it brings about the change that people are looking for in their lives. I'm hoping that I can share some things with you today that will help you bring about some of the changes that you want to see in your students. So, teachers making a difference. We live in times of rapid change. It's been characteristic of our lifetime that things are changing faster during our lifetime than they've ever changed in history. That there were periods of history where people did exactly the same thing, the same way, generation after generation after generation, and nothing changed. But then we got into our generation, the industrial age, and now the digital age, and things are changing all the time. And it's really making it tough to keep up with what's going on and all the changes that are around us. Let me just give you a little quiz here. And this is American numbers here. Years it took to reach a market audience of 50 million people with some of these products: radio, TV, internet, iPod, and Facebook. How many years do you think it took to get 50 million people in America to have a radio in their home? Give me a guess. How many years? 8. Higher, lower? You have any? Higher. 15. 38. See, that was a long time ago. That was right at the turn of the 1900s that the radio came out. But it took 38 years to get the radio into 50 million homes in America. Television didn't come until the late 1940s, early 1950s. How long do you think it took to get television in 50 million homes? 25. Good guess. 13. We're picking up speed. You see, as we're moving through time, change is coming faster than it did before. All right, then the internet. Al Gore invented the internet. That's a joke in America. It doesn't work. It doesn't work here. What do you think? How long did it take to get the internet in 50 million homes in America? 5. 2.
10.
4. Okay, so you're getting smart. You know to knock the number down. It took 4 years. And then the iPod. You see, I didn't even know what an iPod was. It took me years to figure out, hey, it's music on that thing. But it didn't get in my home. It still hadn't gotten in my home. But how long did it take to get the iPod in 50 million homes in America? 3.
3 years.
And then Facebook. How long did it take to get Facebook in 50 minutes? 5 minutes. It felt like 5 minutes. It's actually 2 years. The point of this is that as we move in time, in our lifetimes, everything is coming faster than it has ever come before. Everything is changing faster than it has ever changed before. Now, this brings about, not only is it a cultural thing, but it's impacting what we're trying to do in Christian education within our churches, because we're dealing with a lot of change going on in our culture. We're dealing with a lot of change going on in the church. We're dealing with students who are in the midst of a whole lot of change. So how is rapid change impacting Christian education in our churches? And I've got 4 things here to share with you. The paradigm shift in Christian education. I grew up during a time where Christian education at church was very teacher-centered. That the teacher did all the talking. You didn't talk unless you were asked to talk. You had your time, and it was, when you said what the teacher asked you to say, you were done, and it goes back to the teacher again. And it was pretty predictable because it was very teacher-centered. We're living in a time now where students expect the classroom situation to be more student-centered. That they expect to have more of a say in what's going on. And you see the change. I'm old enough, and again, I don't know how this connects in Canada, but the Johnny Carson show that used to be on late night, and even Jack Parr before him, I remember. But it was, he sat at a desk and he talked, or he had a guest sitting beside him that he talked with, and that was it. Everything was right there. But then it began to change where the host has a microphone and he's up in the audience, asking the audience stuff. And the audience gets to participate on national TV. You get to say your 5 seconds worth of whatever you want to say. And it's audience participation. And we saw it even more in Oprah. She was up in the crowd all the time with her microphone. It's just changed because today's students think they need to have a voice. What they have is important to say, and they don't want a teacher just doing all the talking. Hey, I've got something I want to add to this. And so we've had to adjust, and it's been hard for older teachers who were raised under the teacher-centered approach. It's been hard to give up some of that control because you're never quite sure what's going to come out from the other side. But it's what the other side expects, and we're shifting toward that student-centered goal. When I was in college, I had a teacher talking about philosophy of a teacher teaching students, and he said the old way was this little rhyme: ram it in, cram it in, children's heads are hollow. Ram it in, cram it in, there's a whole lot more to follow. And that was it. The teacher, you go in and you unscrew the top of their head, you just cram everything you can cram in there, screw it back on before the second bell and get them out of there. It's changed because it's not that teacher-centered now. It doesn't mean the teacher doesn't have a lot of work to do to be successful in the classroom. But it says that students expect to have a voice in the education process. And if they don't get that voice, they're probably not going to get very well educated in your class. So it's an expectation of that. A second paradigm shift is in Bible knowledge. I grew up in a time that Bible knowledge was king. Whoever could quote the most scripture, whoever could answer the most Bible trivia questions. We even played games in classes where you would ask questions, and if you answered it right, somebody missed it, you get to move ahead of them to try to get to the head of the line. And it was very, when you finished the little lesson, it was Bible trivia time, and whoever knew the most was king or queen of the class. What I found out from my own experience going to church all my life and Bible school and Wednesday night and the whole deal. And knowing a lot of my friends at school that went to their congregations and were doing the same thing that I was doing, I saw a whole lot of my friends go off to university and totally lose their faith. All the stuff that they knew, they didn't have a clue how to apply it. They didn't know how to integrate all those facts into real life. And so Satan just ate them up when they got away from home and away from their church. They didn't have the practical life skill knowledge to know what to do with the Bible they had learned. I think we're learning now to try to make it a little more practical, to try to make it a little more life-oriented. And that's part of the shift that we're dealing with today. You have to have the Bible knowledge, and I don't want to downplay that at all. But Bible knowledge without relevance to today's living is not that useful. So you got to make the connection. A third paradigm shift is from uniformity to options. I grew up on Gospel Advocate curriculum, dated curriculum. It had a date at the top of the lesson. Everybody in churches of Christ across the United States was teaching that same lesson at that same age level everywhere in churches across the country. You could go on vacation and not miss a lesson if you went to church, because that teacher was going to be teaching that same lesson. Everything was uniform. And they all taught it exactly the same way. It had the lesson scripture at the top, and then it had some reading material, and then it had questions at the end. And every teacher that I ever had, every place I ever visited, they would start with, where are we going to start today? Who's going to read verse 1? And okay, you got verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, 5, and 6 until you read all the text. And I never listened to what the other guy was reading, because I was counting ahead to see what verse I had to read and see if I could pronounce all the words in it. So, we were reading the Bible, but I wasn't paying any attention. And then when you finish that, wherever you leave off, the next guy gets question number 1. And same thing, when we got to the questions, I'm counting how many am I, and which question do I get, and do I know the answer to that question? And it was very uniform. Everything was very uniform. Today, it's all about options. Hey, have you noticed when you go in restaurants, nobody wants to order just like it is on the menu? Well, I want this, but can you leave that off? Can you add this on? Everybody wants it their way. And nobody wants uniformity. Hey, here's the hamburger, take it, buddy. We don't do that anymore. It's have it your way. And so everywhere we go, we are expecting options and flexibility. The curriculum that I grew up on had no options and had no flexibility. Good curriculum today offers that. It says, here are three options for your class for this part of the lesson. Choose the one that you think fits your students best. So, and go with that. So options and flexibility are a big deal today that they weren't that big a deal in my growing up days. And finally, I grew up in a classroom situation that information flowed from the top down. And I'm finding today that a lot of information is flowing from the bottom up. That students have access to a whole lot of things going on in their lives that I don't have access to as a teacher. I don't have the life experience to be able to talk about that. There are things that I can share down to them, but there are things that they can share up to me and make me a better teacher. And sometimes I need to listen. Sometimes it helps me understand who I'm trying to teach if I listen and I let them teach me so that I can teach them better. And so it's a top-down and a bottom-up thing. And it happened in my house during the time that the VCR, you could record programs on TV. I never got it. You know, if I wanted to record a show, I had to pray to God that one of my kids was on it, because there was no chance I was going to get it right. And even when everybody was wearing a digital watch, you know, I got one of those, and I would travel for these workshops, and I would try to change time zones, and I'd have alarms going off in the middle of the night and in the middle of church. And, you know, and what did I do? You know, I just tried to change it an hour. And I'd get home and take it off and pitch it to one of my kids and say, fix this watch. And finally I went back to hands. You know, I can handle hands. But that's, I needed some bottom-up help at home. And the joke is, you know, if you don't know how to DVR a show, get one of your grandkids to come. Or, you know, if your printer's not working for your computer, get one of your grandkids to show you how to do it. And it's becoming a lot of bottom-up information, where it used to all be, wisdom always flowed down. And now it's flowing both ways. And as teachers, we have to recognize that. All right. Quickly, moving along. I ran across this quote several years ago by Alvin Toffler, and he's the guy who wrote Future Shock, and his job was to figure out trends that are coming into the world and what the world will look like 20 years down the road based on the new stuff that's happening right now. And his quote is great, and it might be kind of small for some of you in the back. The illiterate of the future are not those that cannot read or write. They are those that cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. That illiteracy in our time is about people who can't deal with change. It's about people who can't let the old way go and accept a new way. Who can't unlearn something and learn something new. And I don't want to be in that illiterate state, and I hope the church can keep up with what's going on so that we don't get caught behind this principle. That I don't want to be functionally illiterate in my generation. Observations concerning the unchurched generation. This too goes back a little way to understanding that the way church had always worked and been passed down successfully from generation to generation was not working as well as it used to. So there was a lot of study, a lot of research into how do we reach people who have fallen through the cracks of our church system, who were raised in good families, who went to church, and now they don't want anything to do with church. How do you reconnect with these people? And they had become the unchurched generation. Well, Lee Strobel wrote a book several years back. He spent 2 chapters giving 15 characteristics of the unchurched around us that we wish would come to church, but we don't have a clue how to connect with. And of those 15 characteristics of the unchurched, there are 5 of them that I want us to look at quickly to finish this first session up. They have rejected the church, but they have not necessarily rejected God. They've rejected the church. You bring up church, I'm not interested in church. But you talk about God, and they are interested in God. They haven't given up on God. And see, we get offended because they're not interested in church, and we assume they don't care anything about God. And that's not generally the truth. The truth generally is that they do care about God, and they feel that they have a relationship with God, even though they don't have a relationship with any church. They're down on church, but they're still up on God. And we need to find a way to connect that information. You can see it. I might have some. Let me see what I got here. This is Americans in the Bible. Our view of the Bible. 88% of all Americans own a copy of the Bible. And that's with all the other religions, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, everything else. It's still 88% of the people in America own a Bible. 80% of them say the Bible is sacred. 80% of all Americans think the Bible is a sacred book. 61% wish they read the Bible more. And this is from the American Bible Society research. I think we got another. America's attitude toward the Bible. 21% of Americans read the Bible at least 4 times a week. I wish church people read the Bible 4 times a week, you know. 39% believe the Bible and are friendly toward it. 23% are neutral toward the Bible. Take it, leave it, it's okay, I don't, whatever on the Bible. And only 17% are antagonistic toward the Bible. And what that says is that we got a vast majority of people who are at least neutral or positive toward the Bible. So it's church, it's us they got the problem with. It's not God, and it's not the Bible. And you can tell by looking at a lot of the things, a lot of the movies still have a very God focus to them, but rarely a church focus to them. Okay? That's second observation about the unchurched is that the unchurched have legitimate spiritual questions, but they don't think church is the place to ask them. And unfortunately, I've been places where the curious have come and asked questions and just gotten whacked down by a teacher in a classroom. How dare you ask that question? How dare you doubt God's power? How dare you? And just berate people for asking a legitimate question. And when that happens, the word gets out there pretty quick. Hey, you go to church, keep your mouth shut. Because if you ask a question, they'll come after you. You know, they don't appreciate questions. So we kind of gotten that reputation that church is not the place to ask those spiritual questions. They have legitimate spiritual questions. There's a lot of spiritual stuff going on in there. And again, you go to television and the movies, and you see how much of what's on television is supernatural. You know, it's all these Marvel characters. It's people that have all these amazing psychic abilities. And because everybody thinks there ought to be something more than what I can see and hear and feel in this life. There ought to be another dimension to it. And they're searching for it. And Hollywood is helping feed that. We're not doing a good enough job of helping feed that. Of letting them know that God is still at work. And God is still doing amazing things in people's lives. And that lives are being totally transformed from evil things, from awful habits, to doing good for other people. So we need to be conscious of the fact that our churches become places where people can ask questions and feel okay, not feel threatened by doing it. Wrong way. Third one, they have little or no denominational loyalty. In my growing up, if you were raised in churches of Christ, you pretty well stuck with churches of Christ. If you were raised Baptist, you pretty well stayed Baptist. If you were raised Catholic, you pretty well stayed Catholic. Times have changed. And everybody is shopping for the religion that fits them best now. And because of that, there's not near the natural denominational, and you know, I'm using that in a crazy sense. Not that we're a denomination, you got that. But in the crazy sense that whatever you've always done, whatever your parents handed down to you, that's probably what you're going to do. Now there's a whole lot of hopping around from people raised in really good Christian families. If they see another brand doing something that fits them better, they're gone. You know, they feed us, or you know, they do this for my kids, or you know, they got the best VBS in the world, and whatever it is, they're jumping ship and going. So the times have changed in that way. Don't expect people to always stick with you just because that's where they've always been. They're looking for a better deal. My mother shopped at Cooper and Martin grocery store when I was a kid. And that's the only place she went. That it didn't matter what ads there were at other groceries around. She shopped at Cooper and Martin. My dad bought gas at Leon's Texaco station. And Leon didn't always have the best price. But my dad always went to Leon's because Leon was his friend. And there was a loyalty. Now, the way people shop is, oh, gas is a penny cheaper over here. I'm going over here. And, so we're looking all the time for what's in it for me. And because we're looking in that direction, we find a lot of people changing all the time, trying to find the place that's working best for them at this time. Kids might get grown, they might look for another place. I'm out of here. I don't have kids anymore, I'm going to do something different. So whatever it is, denominational loyalty is kind of gone by the wayside. Fourth one, characteristic of the unchurched generation is that even though they don't think church is the place for them, they think church is the place for their kids. And if the church had a preschool program as opposed to just somebody with wee tykes or something, a generic brand, they would choose the church first because they know the church is going to have some moral training to it that they want for their children. So even the generation of the unchurched is looking for something better for their children, especially their small children. So it's an open door for us to be able to find children and build bridges to the parents. A lot of churches in our area have Mother's Day Out programs or preschool programs in the church building. And then they'll have a graduation in the church auditorium just to get the parents to come in and say, hey, I'm over the fear. I hadn't been in church in 50 years, but I'm over it, and I'm in here, and the people are friendly, and I didn't die going to church. So be willing to work with the children because they, even though they're not into church themselves as parents, there's something about it that they want for their children. And finally, the fifth one of these, the unchurched are tolerant of all religions, but they see Christians as narrow-minded. They like the smorgasbord approach to religion, that I pick a little bit of Buddhism, I really like that part, like that meditation thing, and I pick a little bit of this over here, and I like that Jewish part about Passover and the Seder meal. I like that. So we just kind of pick and choose the parts that we like. And that's what this generation is doing. That they're not plugged into anything, but their beliefs are a conglomeration of everything. And they pick and choose the parts they like, they reject the parts that they don't like. And there is no absolute right or wrong. It's I'm going to pick that. It's just like a smorgasbord. I don't like green peas. I'm not going to put any on my plate. You like them, you get them. I don't want them. And so it is with religion. We pull the parts that we like, we reject the parts that we don't. Now, here this comes together. What does all this mean to us as teachers today? There are three constants in the midst of all change. Love for God, love for people, love for His Word. And that's what we have to be concentrated on as teachers today. Those three things. Love for God, love for people, love for His Word. And if we can make that work, I think we can connect with more people. Let me close out this session with a story. And this is the one you're waiting on. And it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. Yeah. So it's a story of a 12-year-old girl named Fanny. And Fanny is the third of 7 children. 3 older, 3 younger. Her dad is a pastry chef at a nice hotel. Her mother's a stay-at-home mom. Never worked outside the home, just took care of the kids. They had basically no religious background, no religious training, never went to church, no Bible in the home. None of that. They were just living their lives. And but one day, Fanny's dad lost his job as a pastry chef. And he looked all around, and there weren't that many hotels that had a pastry chef, and couldn't find anything open. And times where the economy was bad, and he just couldn't find work. And because it was a family with 7 children, and only one income, and that income was gone, the family spiraled into poverty pretty quickly. And they lost their house, and they had to find a place to rent. And it wasn't long before they couldn't pay the rent, and they got evicted, and had to go find another place that was worse than the place they moved out of, which was worse than the house they lived in. And it just kept going from bad to worse. Fanny's dad finally got a job in a bread bakery, just on the assembly line, running a big dough machine, or watching loaves come down and slicing them, or whatever his job was. That was it, at about minimum wage, instead of being a pastry chef. And he, even with the check, he wasn't bringing home enough money to take care of his family. And so he got depressed because he's the breadwinner. He can't support his family, and he turns to drinking. And so what little money he's making, he starts spending it on alcohol instead of taking care of his kids. And in the meantime, the family just spirals deeper and deeper into poverty. And it ends up in such a bad place that that one winter night, Fanny's 3 brothers woke up that morning with 4 inches of snow on their bed that had blown in through the cracks in the walls of the little shack that they were living in. One of her younger sisters always had to sleep on the couch because there wasn't any room anywhere else. And she got bitten by a rat on her eyelid while she slept. It was awful. And things just kept on getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, Fanny's getting pretty hopeless about the whole situation. 12 years old. Her family is just totally out of control. But she has some friends at school that go to church. And there is a church about 1.5 blocks from the little shack that they're living in. And she decides on her own one morning she's going to get up. She's going to put on the best little dress she's got. She's going to walk up to that church, and she's going to see what they do up there and if there's any hope at all in a church. And so she did it. She didn't tell her parents, didn't tell her siblings. Got up, walked up to church, got inside the auditorium just at the time church was starting, sat down on the back row. Several people turned around and stared at her. Nobody spoke. A guy got up and made some announcements about people, and that didn't mean anything to her. Another guy got up and is singing these songs that she's never heard before. He's slinging his arm all over the place while he's singing, and singing about guiding somebody's pilgrim bark aright. It doesn't make any sense at all. Night with Evan Pinion. Why would anybody want to spend the night with Evan Pinion anyway? And so, this is just all going over her head. It's not making any sense. The guy gets up and prays, and he prays in King James English, and she doesn't understand half of the prayer. And she's thinking, oh man, I made a mistake. Preacher gets up and he's on a rant about somebody at some congregation down the street is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, and he's just wearing them out. And she said, that doesn't mean anything to me, doesn't give me any hope. They did communion, and the guys that served communion, when they got to her back row, they just turned around and walked back up front. They didn't even offer. She didn't know why everybody got a snack and she didn't. Why? What was it about her that she couldn't even get a snack at this place? So she's done. It's finally, the hour's over, and she's thinking, thank goodness I'm out of here. And she starts to head for the door, and a sweet little elderly lady catches her before she can get out the door. Asks what her name is, where do you live, where do you go to school, how old are you, what grade are you in? Just interrogating her. And she's thinking, lady, leave me alone and let me go. I promise I'll never come back. But the lady says, I teach a class of girls your age in the basement. and the class starts in just a few minutes. I'd love for you to be in my class. And she was so sweet that Fanny just couldn't say no. So she went to the class, and lo and behold, that lady taught her about God and taught her about Jesus in a way that she understood. And she thought, well, this is not so bad after all. I might come back next week and put up with the worship service to get to come to the class again. And so she did. And she did that for several weeks, and she learned about Jesus, and she learned about sin, and she learned about forgiveness, learned about baptism, and it wasn't too many weeks that she said, hey, I need to be baptized. And she was at age 12. And after that, it wasn't long until her siblings started tagging along behind her and going to their classes and learning about Jesus. And in their own time, they made their decisions to follow Christ as well. I know the story of this 12-year-old girl named Fanny because she was my mother. When you teach, you never know who God is going to put in your class. Okay? You never know. My mother ended up being the fourth of 14 children. They just kept on coming. You wonder why Daniel and Julie have 4 already? It must be genetics. I don't know. Skipped a generation, but for them, they're back in it. But 14 children, and of those 14 kids, almost every one of them became a Christian. Almost every one of them found a church wherever they lived, became an active part, became Bible school teachers, became song leaders, became deacons and elders, and it's rippled down to their children and their grandchildren, all because one teacher had an interest. One teacher cared. And my message to you as we close out this first session is that whatever age level you're teaching, we as teachers never know who God is going to put in our class. We never know what plans God has for a certain person. And we have to be ready. We have to be prepared to teach, prepared to care, prepared to love, prepared to share God's Word, because we never know who that special person is in our class. We are privileged to cooperate with God in a ministry that carries on His Word and His will on this earth. Teachers, be ready, be prepared, and care for the people that come to your class. Let's take a break. And if we start at 2:30 by that clock, we're good. Okay? So whatever you want to do, mill around.